God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, guys, welcome back to Recovery Addicts. This episode is brought to you by Lord's Gym Auburn, or more than just a gym. So we're diving back into the big book here with Chapter 8, To Wives. And, this chapter relates to all spouses. Anybody who's struggling with somebody in active addiction will get a lot out of this chapter. Parents, husbands, wives, it doesn't really matter. Children even. It's an inside look at what it's like to be living with an alcoholic and, what those signs and symptoms are, what the dilemma is, and how to deal with them. So here we go, Chapter 8, To Wives. With few exceptions, our book thus far has spoken of men. But what we have said applies quite as much to women. Our activities in behalf of women who drink are on the increase. There is evidence that women regain their health as readily as men if they try our suggestions. And just to stop right there is this disease has no boundaries, right? It affects men, women, white, Black, Mexican, doesn't matter, race, color, creed, religion, sexual identity, anything. You can be touched and freaking jacked up by addiction. But, to go right along with that, recovery has no boundaries either. If you can be an addict, you can recover. I'm no better than anybody. And people of all races, colors, creeds, ethnicities, religion, lack of religion, doesn't matter. People recover from this disease. But for every man who drinks, others are involved. The wife who trembles in fear of the next debauch. The mother and father who see their son wasting away. Among us are wives, relatives, and friends whose problem has been solved, as well as some who have not yet found a happy solution. We want the wives of Alcoholics Anonymous to address the wives of men who drink too much. What they say will apply to nearly everyone bound by ties of blood or affection to the alcoholic. As wives of Alcoholics Anonymous, we would like you to feel that we understand as perhaps few can. We want to analyze mistakes we have made. We want to leave you with the feeling that no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness too great to be overcome. So this is, written for women by women. You know what I mean? It's one wife of an alcoholic helping another, right? And it's the same parallel with addiction and alcoholism. It's like one alcoholic helping another is without parallel, and same with our spouses, people that have been through it and dealt with all these issues. Who better to help the next person, right? We have traveled a rocky road, there is no mistake about that. We have had long rendezvous with hurt, pride, frustration, self-pity, misunderstanding, and fear. These are not pleasant companions. We have been driven to maudlin sympathy, to bitter resentment. Some of us veered from extreme to extreme, ever hoping that one day our loved ones would be themselves once more. Our loyalty and the desire that our husbands hold up their heads and be like other men have begotten all sorts of predicaments. We have been unselfish and self-sacrificing. We have told innumerable lies to protect our pride and our husbands' reputations. We have prayed, we have begged, we have been patient, we have struck out viciously, we have run away, we have been hysterical, we have been terror-stricken, we have sought sympathy, we have had retaliatory love affairs with other men. Our homes have been battlegrounds many an evening. In the morning we have kissed and made up. Our friends have counseled, chucking the men, and we have done so with finality. Only to be back a little while hoping, always hoping. Our men have sworn great solemn oaths that they were through drinking forever. We have believed them when no one else could or would. Then, in days, weeks, or months, a fresh outburst. And God bless the women that stick by our side, because we put those that we love through so much, and I speak for myself, just hurt the people that I cared about and really hurt the people that cared about me and just lied and manipulated and, just was not living right, deceptive and just a piece of crap, and I hurt women that loved me, and I hurt my mother and people that cared about me, and really drug some people through the mud. And, some women tried to stick around, but, I was just too much, and I always drove them all away. We seldom had friends at our homes, never knowing how or when the men of the house would appear. We could make few social engagements. We came to live almost alone. When we were invited out, our husbands sneaked so many drinks that they spoiled the occasion. If, on the other hand, they took nothing, their self-pity made them killjoys. There was never financial security. Positions were always in jeopardy or gone. An armored car could not have brought the pay envelopes home. The checking account melted like snow in June. Sometimes there were other women. How heartbreaking was this discovery? How cruel to be told they were understood our men as we did not. The bill collectors, the sheriffs, the angry taxi drivers, the policemen, the bums, the pals, even the ladies they sometimes brought home. Our husbands thought we were so inhospitable. Joy killer, nag, wet blanket, that's what they said. Next day they would be themselves again and we would forgive and try to forget. We have tried to hold the love of our children for their father. We have told small tots that father was sick, which was much nearer to the truth than we realized. And that is the truth, We're sick out there and suffering from this disease of alcoholism. And that's why the women stick around, right? Is because they know that it's not us. They know that we're sick. They know that we're struggling, and they just hold on to that hope that we'll pull our heads out of our butts and get back to the men that they fell in love with in the first place, And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, They struck the children, kicked out the panels, smashed treasured crockery, and ripped the keys out of the pianos. In the midst of such pandemonium, they may have rushed out, threatening to live with the other woman forever. In desperation, we have even gotten tight ourselves. The drunk to end all drunks. The unexpected result was that our husbands seemed to like it. Perhaps at this point, we got a divorce and took the children home to father and mother. Then we were severely criticized by our husband's parents for desertion. Usually we did not leave. We stayed on and on. We finally sought employment ourselves as destitution faced us and our families. We began to ask medical advice as the sprees got closer together. The alarming physical and mental symptoms, the deepening pall of remorse, depression, and inferiority that settled down on our loved ones. These things terrified and distracted us. As animals on a treadmill, we have patiently and warily climbed, falling back in exhaustion after each futile effort to reach solid ground. Most of us have entered the final stage with its commitment to health resorts, sanitariums, hospitals, and jails. Sometimes they're even screaming delirium and insanity. Death was often near. Under these conditions, we naturally made mistakes. Some of them rose out of the ignorance of alcoholism. Sometimes we sensed dimly that we were dealing with sick men. We had fully understood the nature of the alcoholic illness, we might have behaved differently. How could men who loved their wives and children be so unthinking, so callous, so cruel? There could be no love in such persons, we thought. And just as we were being convinced of their heartlessness, they would surprise us with fresh resolves and new attentions. For a while they would be their old, sweet selves, only to dash the new structure of affection to pieces once more. Asked why they commenced to drink again, they would reply with some silly excuse or none. It was so baffling, so heartbreaking. Could we have been so mistaken in the men we married? When drinking, they were strangers. Sometimes they were so inaccessible that it seemed as though a great wall had been built around them. And even if they did not love their families, how could they be so blind about themselves? What had become of their judgment, their common sense, their willpower? Why could they not see that drink meant ruin to them? Why was it, when these dangers were pointed out, that they agreed and then got drunk again immediately? These are some of the questions which race through the mind of every woman who has an alcoholic husband. We hope this book has answered some of them. Perhaps your husband has been living in that strange world of alcoholism, where everything is distorted and exaggerated. You can see that he really does love you with his better self. Of course, there is such a thing as incompatibility, but in nearly every instance, the alcoholic only seems to be unloving and inconsiderate. It is usually because he has a warped and sickened and that he says he does these appalling things. Today, most of our men are better husbands and fathers than ever before. Try not to condemn your alcoholic husband, no matter what he says or does. He is just another very sick, unreasonable person. Treat him, when you can, as though he had pneumonia. When he angers you, remember that he is very ill. And that's such a hard thing to do, you know. It's like, this has been labeled as a disease, right? And it's a hard thing to get our heads around because it's a choice, right? It's like you're choosing to drink. You continue to choose alcohol over and over and over again, regardless of the consequences. Like your marriage is failing, you're losing your job, you don't have a relationship with your children, you're, abusing your family, your, health is failing, you're losing your marbles, you're blowing all your money, like all of these negative consequences, right? I just had all of these negative consequences staring me down and every positive reason to stay sober. Problem is I'm absolutely powerless over alcohol. When I am in active alcoholism, I do not have a choice. It literally hijacks my brain, and if I'm free, I am under the influence. It just has me, king alcohol, and it's a cycle, where it's like, my life's jacked up because I'm drinking, but I'm drinking because my life's jacked up, and it just compiles and gets worse and worse, until death or jail or sobriety, But you have to want it with everything you got, And the first thing is that self-awareness of how you're living, and you got to want to be sober sometimes first, but for the spouse looking at us, it's just baffling that we would continue to choose alcohol over them, right? Over their families, over their money, over their standing in society. Like, you look like an idiot when you're struggling with alcoholism, but it really is a disease of the mind and of the spirit. Your spirit is at dis-ease. You have no peace. We have no serenity. Our spirits are dark. I was just surrounded by darkness. I could just feel this darkness over me, and my body was just addicted to alcohol. And my stomach was jacked up. My liver was jacked up. My brain was jacked up. Like I was succumbing to this disease of addiction, and we have to really put that into perspective when we're dealing with somebody that is actively struggling with alcoholism. Like, you really have to realize that they don't actually have a choice, that they really are powerless, and that if they could, they would in most points, especially towards the end. And not all of them. Don't get me wrong. It's not all. Everybody's different. And some of them don't want to stop. And some of them don't actually care that they're hurting you. But for the people that genuinely care and are good people, but they continue to choose alcohol over and over, it's because they're powerless. They don't have the choice to stop anymore, That's a hard thing to get your head around, because it just seems like we choose alcohol over you, but it's not the truth. There is an important exception to the foregoing. We realize some men are thoroughly bad-intentioned, that no amount of patience will make any difference. An alcoholic of this temperament may be quick to use this chapter as a club over your head. Don't let him get away with it. If you are positive he is one of this type, you may feel you had better leave. Is it right to let him ruin your life and the lives of your children, especially when he has before him a way to stop his drinking and abuse if he really wants to pay the price? The problem with which you struggle usually falls within one of four categories. 1, your husband may be only a heavy drinker. His drinking may be constant, or it may be heavy only on certain occasions. Perhaps he spends too much money for liquor. It may be slowing him up mentally and physically, but he does not see it. Sometimes he is a source of embarrassment to you and his friends. He is positive he can handle his liquor, that it does him no harm, that drinking is necessary in his business. He would probably be insulted if he were called an alcoholic. This world is full of people like him. Some will moderate or stop altogether, and some will not. Of those who keep on, a good number will become true alcoholics after a while. 2, your husband is showing lack of control, for he is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. He often gets entirely out of hand when drinking. He admits this is true, but it is positive that he will do better. He has begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderating or staying dry. Maybe he is beginning to lose his friends. His business may suffer somewhat. He is worried at times, and is becoming aware that he cannot drink like other people. He sometimes drinks in the morning and through the day also, to hold his nervousness in check. He is remorseful after serious drinking bouts and tells you he wants to stop. But when he gets over the spree, he begins to think once more how he can drink moderately next time. We think this person is in danger. These are the earmarks of a real alcoholic. Perhaps he can still tend to business fairly well. He has no means ruined everything. As we say among ourselves, he wants to stop. 3, this husband has gone much farther than husband number 2. Though once like husband number 2, he became worse. His friends have slipped away. His home is a near wreck, and he cannot hold a position. Maybe the doctor has been called in, and the weary round of sanitariums and hospitals has begun. He admits he cannot drink like other people, but does not see why. He clings to the notion that he will find yet a way to do so. He may have come to the point where he desperately wants to stop, but cannot. His case presents additional questions which we shall try to answer for you. For you can be quite hopeful of a situation like this. 4, you may have a husband of whom you completely despair. He has been placed in one institution after another. He is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. Sometimes he drinks on the way home from the hospital. Perhaps he has had delirium tremens. Doctors may shake their heads and advise you to have him committed. Maybe you have already been obliged to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. Many of our husbands were just as far gone, yet they got well. And sometimes with alcoholism and addiction, it's like the worse they are, the better chance they have at getting sober. Because they've already been the first husband, the second husband, the third husband. Now they're the fourth husband, where it's like, hopefully they're hitting their bottom. You know what I mean? It's like, for me personally, like I had to lose everything. I had worked my way through those 4 stages. I had struggled. I had, realized I was struggling, but was able to keep my positions, like able to show up and get a job and keep it for a little bit, but I'd ruin it. Same thing with relationships. Like I'd get a good girl, things would be in order, and I would drink too much and ruin it. And then I started to realize, okay, things are really becoming a problem, but I can't stop, but I want to be sober, right? Especially when I had my daughter, it was like, dude, I wanted to be sober, but I just hadn't quite figured out how to do it. I hadn't really surrendered myself to this program or surrendered my life to a higher power to the point where I was willing to do whatever it took to get and stay sober, right? Like I knew things were a problem. It was evident it was a problem. The rehabs had started, I was losing things and I couldn't stop, And then eventually I burned everything to the ground. I lost everything, and that's what it took for me. It took me losing everything to find that rock bottom, and I was given that gift of desperation. Where I knew that this was life and death, that I was going to spend the rest of my life in prison or die. Those were legitimately the more likely outcomes of my life. But there was a chance. I had a chance to get sober, And I cried out to God and asked him to come into my life and just show me how to do this. Show me how to live clean and sober, because all of my best efforts have gotten me to that point of just hopeless, incomprehensible demoralization. That's where my best thinking goes. That's where that powerless, unmanageability takes me to, and it's a slow, progressive illness. Like, it took time to get to that dark place. Didn't happen overnight, And this recovery doesn't happen overnight either. But there is hope, even for this, what seems to be lost cause number 4 guy. Like, they're typically in the best position to actually grasp the desperation of their circumstances and are willing to be honest, open-minded about that situation and try something different, like actually, Let's now go back to husband number 1. Oddly enough, he is often difficult to deal with. He enjoys drinking. It stirs his imagination. His friends feel closer over a highball. Perhaps you enjoy drinking with him yourself when he doesn't go too far. You have passed happy evenings together, chatting and drinking before your fire. Perhaps you both like parties which would be dull without liquor. We have enjoyed such evenings ourselves. We have a good time. We know all about liquor as a social lubricant. Some, but not all of us, think it has its advantages when reasonably used. The first principle of success is that you should never be angry. Even though your husband becomes unbearable and you have to leave him temporarily, you should, if you can, go without rancor. Patience and good temper are most necessary. Our next thought is that you should never tell him what he must do about his drinking. If he gets the idea that you're a nag or a killjoy, your chances of accomplishing anything useful may be 0. He will use that as an excuse to drink more. He will tell you he is misunderstood. This may lead to lonely evenings for you. He may seek someone else to console him, not always another man. That's so true. Like, when you're in that denial phase, you can't tell them anything. Like, they have to come to terms by themselves that this is an issue. If they don't think there's an issue, there's not an issue to them, right? You're the issue. You keep bringing it up. Why you keep bringing it up? You're killing my high. You're pissing me off, and I'm going to leave and go drink. And I'm going to just drink just to piss you off too. Just leave me alone. You're the one that has an issue. I don't have an issue. All right? Be determined that your husband's drinking is not going to spoil your relations with your children or your friends. They need your companionship and your help. It is possible to have a full and useful life though your husband continues to drink. We know women who are unafraid, even happy under these conditions. Do not set your heart on reforming your husband. You may be unable to do so no matter how hard you try. And a lot of women that are listening to this are going to be, people that are codependent, right? Like, you're probably codependent if you're listening to this and not an alcoholic. But you need to understand that your peace and happiness depends on you, right? It doesn't depend on your circumstances. It depends on your perspective on your circumstances. It begins and ends with you. The world can be on fire, but if I'm okay and have peace and serenity within myself, and I'm okay with my Creator, it doesn't matter what my circumstances is, I can still have peace. And when you come from that place of peace and wholeness to a broken situation, then you will be much more capable of dealing with that situation properly. But if you're coming to the table with resentments and codependent behaviors, it's going to be a hard time for you if your happiness depends on somebody else and the way that they're treating you. We know these suggestions are sometimes difficult to follow, but you will save many a heartbreak if you can succeed in observing them. Your husband may come to appreciate your reasonableness and patience. This may lay the groundwork for a friendly talk about his alcoholic problem. Try to have him bring up the subject himself. Be sure you are not critical during such a discussion. Attempt instead to put yourself in his place. Let him see that you want to be helpful rather than critical. It's crucial. He's got to come to the conclusion. And if you're nagging and poking at him, you're just going to fight about it. When a discussion does arise, you might suggest he read this book or at least the chapter on alcoholism. Tell him you have been worried, though perhaps needlessly. You think he ought to know the subject better, as everyone should have a clear understanding of the risk he takes if he drinks too much. Show him you have confidence in his power to stop or moderate. Say you do not want to be a wet blanket, that you only want him to take care of his health. Thus you may succeed in interesting him about alcoholism. He probably has several alcoholics among his own acquaintances. You might suggest that you both take an interest in them. Drinkers like to help other drinkers. Your husband may be willing to talk to one of them. If this kind of approach does not catch your husband's interest, it may be best to drop the subject. But after a friendly talk to your husband, he will usually revive the topic himself. It's about planting those seeds sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, if you can bring it up in discussion, and sometimes it's easier to talk about somebody else's problem. I'm not talking about gossiping, but pointing out the tendencies and the symptoms of alcoholism that you're seeing in somebody else, and kind of allow him to see how his actions resemble an alcoholic's, right? That way he can come to his own decision that he's an alcoholic or that he's drinking alcoholically. Because if you try to shove this thing down their throat, it's not going to work out, you know? But you plant those seeds, you know, bring up AA somehow, you know, bring up this book and just bring it up in discussion without pointing the finger. If this kind of approach does not catch your husband's interest, it may be best to drop the subject. But after friendly talk, your husband will usually revive. So suppose, however, that your husband fits the description of number 2. The same principles which apply to husband number 1 should be practiced. But after his next binge, ask him if he would really like to get over drinking for good. Do not ask that he do it for you or for anyone else. Just ask if he would like to. The chances are he would. And it's important that you ask them like when they're hungover. That's a key. Because they don't want it. Because if they feel miserable and they have the shame and the guilt of like doing it again and again and just like acting like an idiot, if you can get them in that moment and ask them, they'll usually be more vulnerable in that situation, right? Show him that as alcoholics, the writers of this book understand. Tell him that some of the interesting stories you have read. If you think he will be shy of a spiritual remedy, ask him to look at the chapter on alcoholism. Then perhaps he'll be interested enough to continue. If he is enthusiastic, your cooperation will mean a great deal. If he is lukewarm or thinks he is not an alcoholic, we suggest you leave him alone. Avoid urging him to follow our program. The seed has been planted in his mind. He knows that thousands of men, much like himself, have recovered. But don't remind him of this after he has been drinking, for he may be angry. Sooner or later, you are likely to find him reading the book once more. Wait until repeated stumbling convince him that he must act, for the more you hurry him, the longer his recovery may be delayed. If you have a number 3 husband, you may be in luck. Being certain he wants to stop, you can go to him with this volume as joyfully as though you had struck oil. He may not share your enthusiasm, but he is practically sure to read the book, and he may go for the program at once. If he does not, you will probably not have long to wait. Again, you should not crowd him. Let him decide for himself. Cheerfully see him through more sprees. Talk about his condition or this book only when he raises the issue. In some cases, it may be better to let someone outside the family present the book. They can urge action without arousing hostility. If your husband is otherwise a normal individual, your chances are good at this stage. That's if he wants to change, but he's having a hard time doing it, right? You would suppose that men in the 4th classification would be quite hopeless, but that is not so. Many of Alcoholics Anonymous were like that. Everybody had given them up. Defeat seemed certain. Yet often such men had spectacular and powerful recoveries. There are exceptions. Some men have been so impaired by alcohol that they cannot stop. Sometimes there are cases where alcoholism is complicated by other disorders. A good doctor or psychiatrist can tell you whether these complications are serious. In any event, try to have your husband read this book. His reaction may be one of enthusiasm. If he has already committed to an institution but can convince you and your doctor that he means business, give him a chance to try our method, unless the doctor thinks his mental condition is too abnormal or dangerous. We make this recommendation with some confidence. For years, we have been working with alcoholics committed to institutions. Since this book was first published, AA has released thousands of alcoholics from asylums and hospitals of every kind. The majority have never returned. The power of God goes deep. And that's very true. And that's, what I do and what we do with hospitals, institutions. We bring these meetings into institutions, right, and hospitals, and bring meetings in there and bring the hope of the word in there, right, and the power of the program to people that can't go to outside meetings. And a lot of people, for one, are there because they know there's an issue and they're ready to change and they're willing, right? They're in a rehab. Sometimes they're forced there. Sometimes they're there just to appease their spouse or whatever, appease the courts, right? But even then, if they're sober, you never know. Sometimes people just catch it in there and they're just like, all right, I'm going to give this thing a chance, right? Even if they didn't have the intent of staying sober. Some people stay sober in there. And, I often recommend people to go to rehab because I know what that powerlessness feels like. You know what I mean? I'm that number 4 guy where I've lost all control to say no, And even if I do want to be sober, I will manipulate myself into staying out of rehab just so I can continue to drink, even though I want to be sober. That's how crazy this disease is. It will backdoor you and manipulate your thinking process to put you in a compromised situation to give you the opportunity to continue to drink. And I know what that feels like. And so I often, when people number 3, number 4 guys, I'll recommend that they go to at least a 30-day program. If you're number 4 guy, you need 90 days to a year, bro, to really change. That's my recommendation because you really need to break down these habits and put some work in and do some introspection, right? And figure out what happened and why you're acting like this and what needs to change. You know what I mean? And those habits are broken down and new habits are learned over a period of time, minimum 90 days, but 6 months to a year, like you can really start to develop some positive habits and, brainwash yourself in sobriety. You know what I mean? But it's not the only way. Like, this is a proven program that people of all stages of alcoholism can get and stay sober if they thoroughly and honestly work this program. It's all about having that spiritual awakening as a result of working these steps, and like being a part of this fellowship and giving back and being of service. You can get and stay sober without going to rehab. It's a fact. You may have the reverse situation on your hands. Perhaps you have a husband who is at large, but who should be committed. Some men cannot or will not get over alcoholism. When they become too dangerous, we think the kind thing is to lock them up, but of course a good doctor should always be consulted. The wives and children of such men suffer horribly, but not more than the men themselves. But sometimes you must start life anew. We know women who have done it. If such women adopt a spiritual way of life, their road will be smoother. If your husband is a drinker, you probably worry over what other people are thinking, and you hate to meet your friends. You draw more and more into yourself, and you think everyone is talking about conditions at your home. You avoid the subject of drinking, even with your own parents. You do not know what to tell the children. When your husband is bad, you become a trembling recluse, wishing the telephone had never been invented. We find that most of this embarrassment is unnecessary. While you need not discuss your husband at length, you can quietly let your friends know the nature of his illness, but you must be on guard not to embarrass him or harm your husband. When you have carefully explained to such people that he is a sick person, you have created a new atmosphere. Barriers which have sprung up between you and your friends will disappear with the growth of sympathetic understanding. You will no longer be self-conscious or feel that you must apologize as though your husband were a weak character. He may be anything but that. Your new courage, good nature, and lack of self-consciousness will do wonders for you socially. That's very true. And this was written when AA was like pretty new, and alcoholism and addiction was like not something you wanted to be associated with. You know what I mean? Now it's much more mainstream. Recovery's mainstream. Like, people want you to get sober. So if they not only want you to get sober, but they want your husband to get sober, and they want your family to be doing okay, right? So there's no shame in addiction. There's no shame in recovery. There's no shame in, having a spouse that's dealing with it too. It's so prevalent. It's in every family. It's in every neighborhood. Like, it escapes nobody. You know what I mean? And every single person has either personally dealt with addiction or knows somebody close to them who has. The same principle applies in dealing with the children. Unless they actually need protection from their father, it is best not to take sides in any argument he has with them while drinking. Use your energies to promote a better understanding all around. Then that terrible tension which grips the home of every problem drinker will be lessened. Frequently, you have felt obliged to tell your husband's employer and his friends that he was sick, when as a matter of fact he was tight. Avoid answering these inquiries as much as you can. Whenever possible, let your husband explain. Your desire to protect him should not cause you to lie to those people when they have a right to know where he is and what he's doing. Discuss this with him when he is sober and in good spirits. Ask him what he should do if he places you in such a position again. But be careful not to be resentful about the last time he did so. There's another paralyzing fear. You may be afraid your husband will lose his position. You are thinking of the disgrace and hard times which will befall you and the children. This experience may come to you, or you may already have had it several times. Should it happen again, regard it in a different light. Maybe it will prove a blessing. It may convince your husband he wants to stop drinking forever. And now you know that he can stop if he will. Time after time, this apparent calamity has been a boon to us, for it opened up a path which led to the discovery of God. We have elsewhere remarked how much better life is lived on a spiritual plane. If God can solve the age-old riddle of alcoholism, he can solve your problems too. We wives have found that, like everybody else, we were afflicted with pride, self-pity, vanity, and all the things which go to make up the self-centered person. And we were not above selfishness or dishonesty. As our husbands began to apply spiritual principles in their lives, we began to see the desirability of doing so too. At first, some of us did not believe we needed this help. We thought, on the whole, we were pretty good women, capable of being nicer if our husbands stopped drinking. But it was a silly idea that we were too good to need God. Now we try to put spiritual principles to work in every department of our lives. When we do that, we find it solves our problems too. The ensuing lack of fear, worry, and hurt feelings is a wonderful thing. We urge you to try our program, for nothing will be so helpful to your husband as the radically changed attitude toward him which God will show you how to have. Go along with your husband if you possibly can. If you and your husband find a solution for the pressing problem of drink, you are, of course, going to be very happy. But all problems will not be solved at once. Seed has started to sprout in a new soil, but growth has only begun. In spite of your newfound happiness, there will be ups and downs. Many of the old problems will still be with you. This is as it should be. The faith and sincerity of both you and your husband will be put to the test. These workouts should be regarded as part of your education, for thus you will be learning to live. You will make mistakes, but if you are in earnest, they will not drag you down. Instead, you will capitalize them. A better way of life will emerge when they are overcome. Some of the snags you will encounter are irritation, hurt feelings, and resentments. Your husband will sometimes be unreasonable and you will want to criticize. Starting from a speck on the domestic horizon, great thunderclouds of dispute may gather. These family dissensions are very dangerous, especially to your husband. Often you must carry the burden of avoiding them or keeping them under control. Never forget that resentment is a deadly hazard to an alcoholic. We do not mean that you have to agree with your husband whenever there is an honest difference of opinion. Just be careful not to disagree in a resentful or critical spirit. You and your husband will find that you can dispose of serious problems easier than you can the trivial ones. Next time you and he have a heated discussion, no matter what the subject, it should be the privilege of either to smile and say, "This is getting serious. I'm sorry I got disturbed. Let's talk about it later." If your husband is trying to live on a spiritual basis, he will also be doing everything in his power to avoid disagreement or contention. Your husband knows he owes you more than sobriety. He wants to make good, yet you must not expect too much. His ways of thinking and doing are the habits of years. Patience, tolerance, understanding, and love are the watchwords. Show him these things in yourself, and they will be reflected back to you from him. Live and let live is the rule. If you both show a willingness to remedy your own defects, there will be little need to criticize each other. We women carry with us a picture of the ideal man, the sort of chap we would like our husbands to be. It is the most natural thing in the world, once his liquor problem is solved, to feel that he will now measure up to that cherished vision. The chances are he will not, for like yourself, he is just beginning his development. Be patient. Another feeling we are very likely to entertain is one of resentment that love and loyalty could not cure our husbands of alcoholism. We do not like the thought that the contents of a book or the work of another alcoholic has accomplished in a few weeks that for which we have struggled for years. At such moments, we forget that alcoholism is an illness over which he could not possibly have had any power. Your husband will be the first to say it was your devotion and care which brought him to the point where he could have a spiritual experience. Without you, he would have gone to pieces long ago. When resentful thoughts come, try to pause and count your blessings. After all, your family is reunited. Alcohol is no longer a problem, and you and your husband are working together towards an undreamed of future. Still, another difficulty is that you may become jealous of the attention he bestows on other people, especially alcoholics. You have been starving for his companionship, yet he spends long hours helping other men and their families. You feel he should now be yours, the fact that he should work with other people to maintain his own sobriety. The fact is that he should work with other people to maintain his own sobriety. Sometimes he will be so interested that he becomes really neglectful. Your house is filled with strangers. You may not like some of them. He gets stirred up about their troubles, but not at all about yours. It will do little good if you point that out and urge more attention for yourself. We find it a real mistake to dampen his enthusiasm for alcoholic work. You should join in his efforts as much as you possibly can. We suggest that you direct some of your thought to the wives of his new alcoholic friends. They need the counsel of love of a woman who has gone through what you have. So true, It's like your husband's going to catch on fire in recovery and your lives are going to change and and you might feel that way, like, I couldn't fix you, now this program fixed you, now you're all into this program and you're neglecting me and the kids and, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And, you just traded one thing for another. But, you got to realize, like, where he came from and, what you guys just went through. And, he'll find his balance. You know what I mean? Some people dedicate their lives to this thing and we find purpose in that, like we lose our purpose and meaning as men in addiction and women, and we feel purposeless out there. Like we're just drifting, and when we get sober and we're involved in these fellowships and involved in these programs, like it gives us purpose and meaning to be able to give back, to relate with another alcoholic. And by helping other alcoholics, it helps us stay sober. And you might feel like we're taking it too far and we're neglecting you and we're putting recovery above you. And the truth is we have to for a while, like we have to put recovery first or else we can't have a relationship with you. Like this thing has to be forefront in our lives, and our relationship with our higher power has to come first in our recovery, and then our recovery has to come first as the foundation of our life, or else what we have going on isn't going to last, right? If I put you first, I put you as my God, if I put you as my priority, then my recovery takes a back seat, and pretty soon I'm slipping back into old habits, and then we're just going to be worse off than we were in the first place, right? So have some patience and like try to be a part of this thing. You know what I mean? Try to help him with his recovery, just like be helpful and attentive and listen and help the women of the people that he's helping. You know what I mean? Be part of rather than, feel like it's driving a wedge between you. It is probably true that you and your husband have been living too much alone, for drinking many times isolates the wife of an alcoholic. Therefore, you probably need fresh interests and a great cause to live for as much as your husband. If you cooperate rather than complain, you will find that his excess enthusiasm will tone down. Both of you will awaken to a sense of responsibility for others. You, as well as your husband, ought to think of what you can put into life instead of how much you can take out. Inevitably, your lives will be fuller for doing so. You will lose the old life to find one much better. Perhaps your husband will make a fair start on the new basis, but just as things are going beautifully, he dismays you by coming home drunk. If you are satisfied he really wants to get over drinking, you need not be alarmed. Though it is infinitely better that he have no relapse at all, as has been true with many of our men, it is by no means a bad thing in some cases. Your husband will see at once that he must redouble his spiritual activities if he expects to survive. You need not remind him of his spiritual deficiency. He will know of it. Cheer him up and ask him how you can be still more helpful. You don't have to relapse, You can get in and stay sober. But just because you relapse doesn't mean you're doomed to continue to relapse. And it doesn't mean that you're doomed to die an alcoholic death either, And just because you go out doesn't mean you have to stay out. It's like, yes, it's hard to come back to these rooms and to raise your hand and start over and admit that you messed up and be honest with people about what happened and, the decisions that you made. But if you're really serious about getting and staying sober, like, I'm willing to humble myself and say I'm struggling, like, this is what happened, and break it down and figure out why you went back out and figure out how to not do it next time. If you're earnest about sobriety, if you're not, you're just going to, have one foot in, one foot out, and you're going to go back out every time things get hard. And, you're never going to hold on to any time because your heart's not in it, right? The slightest sign of fear or intolerance may lessen your husband's chance of recovery. In a weak moment, he may take your dislike of his high-stepping friends as one of those insanely trivial excuses to drink. We never try to arrange a man's life so as to shield him from temptation. The slightest disposition on your part to guide his appointments or his affairs so he will not be tempted will be noticed. Make him feel absolutely free to come and go as he likes. This is important. If he gets drunk, don't blame yourself. God has either removed your husband's liquor problem or he has not. If not, it had better be found out right away. Then you and your husband can get right down to fundamentals. If a repetition is to be prevented, place the problem, along with everything else, in God's hands. We realize that we have been giving you much direction and advice. We may have seemed to lecture. If that is so, we are sorry. For we ourselves don't always care for people who lecture us. But what we have related is based upon experience, some of it painful. We have had to learn these things the hard way. That is why we are anxious that you understand and that you avoid these unnecessary difficulties. So, to you out there who may soon be with us, we say good luck and God bless you. So there's also, different programs for people that are struggling with spouses. Al-Anon, is the main one. They focus on codependency, and it's a very strong program, and it's a fellowship, and it's a group of men and women who have people in their lives that are struggling with addiction and how they have behaved alongside with them in those relationships, right? And it's about taking a look at yourself and also about how to deal with our spouses who are still struggling with all types of things, not just alcoholism, but it's a good program. I hear a lot of good things from it, and I'm definitely a believer in it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach me on lordsgymoutreach.com, or hit up our Instagram, Recovery Addicts Podcast on Instagram, or, find me on Facebook or Instagram at Blaine Overton or Overton Blaine. And I'm always willing to help. I love you guys, and I care about you and your families, and I just want us all to succeed. So, we're in this together, and if there's any way that I can possibly help, I'm always willing to help. God bless.
Victorious we became, but never forgot where we came from. Life or death, not a game. We came to change the lane. Recovery addicts, that's the name. Give yourself a break, just one day at a time. You were born to shine, so live and let love be forever. My sister, my brother, don't give in. Please remember, the lie is dead. We do recover. Welcome home.